Lachish Letters do. Same time, same place, same situation. They were weakening the morale of the people. So they were treasonous. That is the official city government reason for chasing out the prophets. They felt they were doing the right thing. Isn't this so fascinating here? It's wonderful how the archaeological discovered texts fills in all of this background information. I love this stuff. This is some of my favorite reading. As Jeremiah puts it, "Therefore the princes," that's really the Sarim, "said unto the king, We beseech thee, let this man be put to death. For thus he weakeneth the hands of the men of war that remain in this city, and the hands of all the people in speaking such words unto them." Well, now that's Jeremiah 38, verse 4. That's exactly what the Lachish Letters said Uriah had done. Isn't that fascinating? Same message. Archaeological discovered texts. Now, Lachish letter number 6 tells us that the words of the prophets are not good. They are liable to loosen the hands. And the Book of Mormon adds this one, another one. "That same year there came many prophets, prophesying unto the people that they must repent, or the great city must be destroyed." 1 Nephi 1 and 4. Well, this was the disheartening news that discouraged people, and it was regarded as subversive, of course. And then I'm gonna skip this part of the. When he talks about the combination of the Egyptian and the Aramaic and the two languages written on parchments, and the Lachish Letters confirm this also. And he talks about the Yahoo and Aya names, IAH and IHAH and YAHU names, and how they fit with Mosiah in the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon names the type of names that are found in the Lachish Letters are the type of names that are discovered in the Book of Mormon. That's kind of interesting. And, well, what we see in the Lachish Letters and the Lehi story is relatively narrow circles of friends, relations, and clandestine flights. This is the theme. The most exciting story of all is how little Mulek escaped and how the Mulekites took off after all the rest of them had left. The Mulekites' king was the lonely survivor from the king's family. We've now found the seal of music. Of Mulek. Jeffrey R. Chadwick has a huge study on that in the Journal of Book of Mormon Studies. The king Zedekiah really did have a son named Mulek, and we've discovered archaeological proof that Mulek existed. I mean, outside of the Book of Mormon. Now that gets pretty interesting. Mulek. Were the Mulekites ever heard again? Yes, in the Book of Mormon, in the New World. And now, like I say, we've discovered this seal of music. Well, the portrait of Laban is absolutely marvelous. Notice this Josh, or Josh. He was the military governor of Lachish at this time. It was the second largest city as well as a strongly fortified place, Lachish. It was just like Jerusalem. It was walled and it was fortified, and the people were signaling each other with their signal fires between Azekah and Lachish and Jerusalem. They were going back and forth. They were, 20, 30 miles apart from each other. Well, he was in charge of everything as the military governor. And see, this is Laban's portrait, isn't it? But this Josh in Lachish has the same parallel theme as Laban in the Book of Mormon in Jerusalem. So we see that the portrait of Laban, so deftly talked about in the Book of Mormon in just a few brief chapters, is perfect. That is what he was. The records were kept in his office, in Josh's office in Lachish, exactly like Laban. Isn't that interesting? A military governor keeping the records. This is how it was done. The Book of Mormon captured this. Who was Laban? He was a military governor of Jerusalem. We are told they are put out by night, remember, in secret councils with the elders, that is the Sarim, and he was in charge of 50 men in the city and 10,000 men in the field. He was in charge of the city police, he was the governor of the city, and the records were kept at his house. They were mostly family records, and he was related to Lehi. That was where they knew they could get their records, because they were kept in the house of Laban, the military governor. Now, it's not a likely place, actually, to keep the genealogy of the people, but that's where it was. That's where it was kept. It was the safest place at that time to keep those genealogies. It was the same thing in Lachish. Now, in a time of alarm, they were put there for safekeeping. That was the safest place to keep them. And sure enough, we learn from the copper scroll of the Dead Sea Scrolls that when Jerusalem was threatened, when Jerusalem itself was threatened again, about 100 BC, they took all the documents they could and they hid them in various places around the city again. See, they were quick to get them to a safe place. That's how they did it. That's exactly the portrait we find in the Book of Mormon. That's probably why the brass plates and all the genealogy were being held under guard. They were kept under lock and key by Laban. Laban wouldn't let the brothers have them, as we've explored, unless they paid him plenty. And then, when they went to pay him plenty, he stole their money anyway and kept the place. What a character this Laban was, huh? Everybody was playing dirty. Everybody was out to get everything because it was so insecure. They didn't know if they would wake up in the morning. Laban didn't after Nephi found him, you see. Such a marvelous picture of the life of the world we live in, isn't it? You can't beat the good old Book of Mormon. Okay, now I'm in Lecture 7, and this is where he gets into some really wonderful detail, and he bounces back and forth between the parallels between Lachish, between Jerusalem, and between the Book of Mormon. And between the Bible, because Jeremiah is in the thick of this also. Now see, we only have just a few comments and chapters of Huldah, the prophetess also. So see, the Bible is not a complete portrait of life in ancient Jerusalem either. I mean, how long had she lived? What was her genealogy? What relationship did she have with Jeremiah? She surely knew of Jeremiah and Lehi and the other prophets. These guys knew of her, and yet there's no mention of her in the book of Jeremiah. So this gets interesting, doesn't it? Each little portrait, each little vignette of the prophets and prophetesses in the ancient city of Jerusalem is scattered about in the records, and nothing's complete. But now we're finding more and more support for the sheer xenophobic state of mind in Jerusalem, 600 BC, and it's the same portrait we have in the Book of Mormon. Now this is utterly astonishing, truly amazing. So in Lecture 7 he says, okay, now we have to get Lehi out of Jerusalem, so here we go. We got to get him going. With all of these stories, on all of these other notes and things, I turned and read that first chapter of Nephi again. And he says, it's miraculous. The condensation, the prose, the simplicity, the directness. He has the 4 qualities that Matthew Arnold says that Homer had. And what are those qualities? I don't know anything else that has them. If you were to be asked on a test, for example, what is the significance of the Lachish Letters for the Book of Mormon? They are immensely important. For one thing, they're contemporary records. These are eyewitness accounts as the Babylonians were coming to destroy Jerusalem. You know, this is beautiful stuff here. Contemporary records, first-hand records, not records that have come down to us. These are not edited, translated, and interpreted. These are the bare bones, on the pottery, writings themselves directly. They're the original documents, and they name names. They don't name Jeremiah. It's interesting that Jeremiah is never named in the Bible except in the book of Jeremiah. In Jeremiah's time, the person they were all consulting as a prophet was Huldah, a woman. She was the prophetess. It's very interesting. Like Lehi, Jeremiah was an amateur prophet. You can see that he was engaged in business dealings and things like that. He moved around a lot. He preached as he went, and so on and so forth. The same thing happened with Lehi. As he was journeying from his home is when that pillar of fire came down and talked to him, you know. And then he went back home, laid on his bed, and then he had his vision of that grand council of the heavens, council of the gods in heaven. So it's very clear from there in the first chapter. But the Lachish letters mention Uriah, Uriah, I should say, sorry, who was a friend of both Lehi and Jeremiah. It mentions some other people that went on in various places, so on and so forth. So, they're leaving. They're leaving, and this situation is exactly the Book of Mormon situation. It's very dramatic and very intense. This is quite clear in both documents. But here we have something which we can check the Book of Mormon step by step. That's what makes the Lachish letters so powerful. So, we go on. The Lachish letters center on the activities of the prophets. They are causing grave concern to the government. Bingo, Book of Mormon thing. They are subversives. We read the same thing in Nephi 1 and 4. Many prophets prophesying, repent or be destroyed. That was subversion. Well, that's never going to do. The city council is just simply not going to allow that kind of crap to be spread around, you see. That's why they hated the prophets.